Morning, everyone. Hello, it's Johnny 2B David here. We are at famous Fort Laramie from the 1840s on the Old West Oregon Trail. Today, Fort Laramie, few trivia, was originally called Fort William by French fur. It was actually a private fort. Then it became Fort John, and then but everybody called it Laramie for some reason. So they just renamed it when the military took over. They just kind of renamed it Fort Laramie here, and this was from 1845 to about right after the Civil War, originally to protect from the Indians. The Indians were attacking because they knew the Indians were being betrayed by the white man for taking all their land. So the Indians would attack. So they had to build these forts on the Oregon Trail. So this would protect the Indians. But I don't know how it became from a private to a public fort to a name change. But here we are at the famous Fort Laramie from 1845 to about 1860 until the Civil War, or maybe till a little after the Civil War. Back, it was built in 1834, and then 1849, and it was closed in 1890, according to what I read. I think the reason it's empty here is because it's springtime. And it's like it's mid-spring, and you know, children are obviously still in school, and people are working and whatnot, and so that's why it's empty during this time of year. But we're gonna explore and see what we can find out. In the Old West. So from 1834, it changed names 3 times. You know, John, Williams, and then Fort Laramie. To protect against the Indians. And obviously, this was an actual live fort. See the track here. And when the Pony Express came this way, it looks like. This here is the paved, so not exactly paved, but sort of the trail for when the wagons, and they'd stay in these barracks. This was kind of like a refreshment. This was kind of like the rest areas of the day, but this was kind of like a refreshing thing for the travelers going from east to west to Oregon or California. They'd stay in those barracks there and buy fresh stuff around there.
Reload their bullets and their food.
The storehouse building.
Hey, good morning.
So,
all that the Navy has they're all nuclear powered.
wow.
Sitting in the dry dock, yeah, I mean they're big, and that's kind of like insane with, the size of the hull on the ballistic, right? I mean, really, because it's the missile that dictates the size. One of my tours, I was at a NATO submarine command, and then so I would go ride other countries' submarines to certify them for operations with NATO forces, and it was, a Swedish boat, diesel one, which actually very,
operations and annual fur trade rendezvous in mountains. The fort also served as a trading post and meeting center with the Indian peoples of the plains. Many tribes, near and far, came to trade buffalo robes for the highly prized manufactured goods of the traders. 2 years later, the fort was acquired by the powerful American Fur Company, and in 1841, the aging log fort was replaced by a larger adobe structure built on a bluff above the Laramie River. New Mexicans skilled in the art of adobe construction built the new fort, its storerooms, lodgings, and shops. Officially, it was named Fort John in honor of John Sarpy, a partner in the American Fur Company. However, this new fort, as well as Fort William before it, was better known by another name, Fort Laramie. In the decade of the 1840s, the quiet role of Fort Laramie radically changed as immigrant travel to the Oregon country and the Great Salt Lake Basin began, following the paths blazed by the fur traders. The fort on the Laramie began to supply the immigrants, making it possible for them to move on. The Indian people continued to visit and trade. They could only watch as their lives changed as well. As the trickle of immigrants became a flood, the government became anxious about the well-being and safety of the immigrants. To address the concern, the United States government determined to establish a set of military posts along the overland route. These posts would assure points of supply, provide a degree of safety, and, it was hoped, prevent conflicts between nervous immigrants and the Indian nations. To accomplish these goals, the United States government purchased Fort Laramie in 1849 from the American Fur Company and immediately began to convert it into a permanent military post. Its first garrison consisted of Company E of the Regiment of Mounted Riflemen. The newly designated post began its missions of security and diplomatic contacts with the tribes. Both the Army and the United States government sought to meet with the Indian nations and negotiate terms for the safe passage of the immigrants through Indian country. Meanwhile, the Army began to expand their new post. The old adobe trading post would later be demolished as the new military post took shape. 2 years after the troops arrived, one of the primary missions was accomplished. The 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie, signed at Horse Creek, created terms which made immigration easier. The treaty gained for the United States rights to use the Oregon Trail in exchange for annual payments to the tribes in the form of cloth, tools, and manufactured goods, and Indian lands were to be recognized by the government. 10,000 Indian people, representing at least 10 tribes, attended the Great Conference, which also reached agreements to end war among the tribes. With completion of the treaty, emigration began in earnest. There were many different reasons motivating immigrants to attempt the long and hazardous journey. For some, it was new land in Oregon and a chance to start over after years of economic turmoil in the East. For the Mormons, it was an escape from religious persecution to Zion, their promised land in the Salt Lake Valley. Some, like Francis Parkman, went simply for adventure and to be part of a restless nation moving west. Others went for riches, to answer the call of gold in California. The overland trails took immigrants and fortune seekers on a 2,000-mile ordeal across arid plains, mountain passes, and dangerous river crossings. Over an entire generation, bands of immigrants, large and small, set off to face the unknown on a journey that could take up to 5 months to complete.
So that was that was a short video of the history of this fort. Lost my train of thought. So a lot of the stuff was torn out. All the acreage was torn out, obviously, but that's how it was. You can see some of the ruts right here, actually, when people traveled on the Oregon Trail or California Mormon trails and whatnot. I had some thought I was going to say, but I forgot what I was going to say. This was where the quartermaster was. But I had another thought I was going to say here, but I forgot what it was. Supposed to get up to 80 degrees today, but anyway, a lot of this was torn down, and it's kind of sad that they punished a black African American group to tear down a lot of the remains of the fort. I didn't record the end of the video, but it's too bad they didn't keep the adobe section of the fort. That would have been really good enforcement. But this is what's left. But this is obviously more spread out than Fort Kearny when I was at Fort Kearny. Obviously, like I said earlier, it's springtime, so that's why it's more since it's springtime, it's more or less empty around here. Everybody's at school and whatnot, and it's not summertime. That's when everybody has their vacations in the summertime. This was a bakery building. This is a guardhouse. These were MPs of the day. These were the MPs. Guardhouse and jail for when, when the military acts up, you have guardhouse. Even in the 19th century, you had a Calistoga wagon, artillery. But this was originally a jail cell for.
This is the guardhouse.
Where this was more barracks that were torn down in the 1890s when that black regiment tore down stuff, unfortunately. Unfortunately, a lot was not preserved. I'm sure during the summertime this is a lot busier. Of course, today's a nice warm day today, oddly enough. Nice, beautiful, warm day. I think it's supposed to be 86 degrees today. This must be one of the barracks that are still reserved, left to go into. So obviously when soldiers act up, you get put in a jail cell. So this is also part of says cells and bags. This is also administrative office, administrative and MP. More part of the guard and jail cells when MP officers had to arrest unruly soldiers that were acting up. So you could still go to jail even in the military. That's why you have military police today. So obviously, when that black regiment tore down what's left. The sign will tell us what this is. Gotta watch out for snakes. The National Park Guide told us to stay alert for snakes that are in the area. These were this was the former site of the administrative buildings, so all the paperwork was done in these were the administrative offices. That's what these ruins are. Administrative offices. That's what's left of them. So those were the administrative offices. One thing they didn't mention though was when the railroad was built, a lot of people didn't need to they could take the railroad across. So this kind of abandoned, especially for living quarters, because the railroad kind of took away a lot of that. Especially in 1869 when the Transcontinental Railroad was established. People kind of skipped this area. They could take a matter of hours instead of a few days to get across country. What's this building? This building, we'll find out. This is the captain's quarters. He has his own house. So the base commander of this, the base commander had his own house. The base commander, the captain, had his own house. So if you're a captain, you got your own house. Because you're a commissioned officer. Servant, I'm guessing this is where the servants' quarters. I'm assuming this is probably servants to prepare their food for the captain. He was the base commander of the time. Now,
Where's the snake?
there are two snakes living under there. Hiding over there. Bedroom. Captain gets his own birdie brigade. That's what's left patrolling this fort. The birdie brigade, they have to patrol this fort. I think they're aware of the snakes. They're the leftovers from Freddy. So Commander Freddy, General Freddy, these guys are going to report to you guys. They're patrolling this outpost for you. This next building is what's left of. We'll find out in a second here. Former Laramie. This is probably what's left of soldier barracks. Over there is where when the Oregon Trail was happening. In the Old West. That's where I believe these next few buildings were non-military would stay and refuel for supplies and get more guns and more ammunition and more fresh food. I should have kept the adobe. Officers' quarters. What's left of the officers' quarters, and then outhouse. What's left of the officers' quarters. In the 19th century, they'd be marching up and down this path that was created for them in the 19th century. This is probably more officer housing. Officer row, these are more officer houses. See, if you're an officer, you get your own house. If you're a soldier, you get those barracks over there. If you're an officer, you get your own house. If you're a soldier, you get to stay in the barracks. This building here is the commissary for officers and soldiers. Eat and relax, play pool, play cards. This is probably the mess hall of the 19th century, this building here. Post office for the railroad. Where this plot of land is where the settlers would stay when they were moving west. This was not, it's not here anymore. But according to that sign there, when the people were going to Oregon, they would rest in this open land here. There used to be buildings for people that, so they'd have a place to stay. Probably a lot better and easier to stay there than it was to, when they're walking, months on the road on a dirt trail going 2 miles an hour. And this is the cavalry. The cavalry stayed in these barracks. So all the soldiers stayed in these barracks. They got lumped together. They didn't get individual houses because they're soldiers. Unfortunately, they had to be lumped together because that's how the Army operates. Only officers get individual houses. That's a big difference when how officers versus soldiers. Soldiers get lumped together compared to officers. You see a big difference between an officer and a soldier. Soldier have to be lumped together because this is how the military operates.
Okay, here are the barracks. This is where the soldiers lived. You got a hardwood bench bed with a blanket underneath it, or a pad. Above there are their uniforms and their gear.
And one thing I wanted to say is the difference between soldier and officer. Obviously, an officer, you get more luxurious living quarters compared to a soldier. This will conclude Fort Laramie. Just like Route 66, little towns of America, back roads of America.
Thanks so much. I know.
This is our town of Morrell, Nebraska. These are the back roads of America here. This is US 36. But it's like a Route 66 town. That's Chimney Rock.
Hey Google, where is Chimney Rock?
We're approaching Chimney Rock here. That's the famous Chimney Rock that people they viewed back in. Famous Chimney Rock.
It says so right there. Visitor Center. Let's go there.